All right, so I have a bit of a confession to make. Since I started getting into metal as a kid, have always had a soft spot for Cannibal Corpse, and I understand that this is a band that is maligned by uh, people that are within the death metal underground community, and I understand why. When a band gets really popular, that doesn't lend itself to being respected by the underground, and a genre that should be very confrontational at getting the audience to understand the finality of death, which is a pretty serious issue. Uh, they have gone to the point of parody by having it be so ridiculously over the top in terms of the gore and the overall presentation. Uh, but I still, as I was growing up, I still found myself listening to the band, because despite knowing that maybe it's not the most solid representation of great songwriting in the death metal genre, uh, I and this goes along with whether or not something has objective merit or is something that you like. I still was able to glean enjoyment out of it because I like shitty stuff. My if you look around, you'll see that I have posters for some terrible fucking movies. This is one of my favorite movies, Microwave Massacre. It's a total piece of shit. Still love it, and that's kind of the same argument that Cannibal Corpse has, and the lights still work, which is very cool. But Cannibal Corpse was never a band that was meant to be taken as one that has substance behind it. They're not an immolation. They're not an incantation. They're not one of those bands. So if you take them at face value, there's plenty worse things you can listen to within the death metal umbrella. I would rather listen to a band like this than most modern bands, just because you know what you're getting, and what you're getting is not pretentious, and it's not something pretending to be anything else. I might retread a little bit about that because after thinking about what makes their riff stylings, I think my biggest dilemma with this band is that they they don't really sound like a death metal band to me. They sound like, at least in modern times, like kind of like a technical thrash band with occasional like hardcore beatdown parts, which is, it's fine, but I think the band kind of stopped having a death metal sound with like Butchered at Birth or Tomb of the Mutilated like a billion years ago. So the overall voicings that they use have more in common with, I don't know, stuff like Modern Haunted sometimes, which is not my cup of tea at all. But I digress on that. What I want to know is, this band has been around over 30 years. Can they construct a decent song? So that's what we're going to talk about today, because they just recently put out a new song from an upcoming record. And I actually am intrigued by this record because they have Eric Rutan on guitars, and I love a lot of the stuff that he's done. Not the biggest Hate Eternal fan. They have moments here and there, but as far as a respectable musician, I think he's a pretty important force within the death metal genre. So at this point in their career, they needed some kind of change. They needed a different direction. We're so many records in, and they, to their credit, they've managed to put out release after release of stuff that isn't overtly compromised by modern trends. Uh, Whether or not that is a benefit to them, because they've been treading water for a long time. The one thing that I will say is, if you get a Cannibal Corpse record, you're going to have decent riffs here and there. And as a guitar player, I pretty much am listening to hear a well-crafted guitar riff, and that's what I will glean from the band. I'm not looking for an artistic statement. I think that they do have what it takes to make one, but I don't think that they're interested in making one. However, at this stage of the game, I would like to know that this many records in, they can write a successful song. So we're going to look at this new song called Murderous Rampage from their upcoming record, find out how it's composed, and see if there's anything to it that would lend itself to a band that has a 30-year career in perfecting their craft. So let's give this a listen. So let's talk about that so far. It's essentially an interplay between only two riffs, and it's very repetitive. The initial hook that you hear there, it's pretty successful at worming its way into your head. And this is a band that in the last several years has had a hard time writing catchy material. Their stuff that is going to be hummable for you is long past buried in the 90s. And I know they're trying to bring that around. They've had a number of kind of forgettable releases with a few gems within the track list. So I can see why they're trying to hammer this hook into your head repeatedly. And, it's kind of an undeniable hook. However, it's not very death metal sounding to me. This is kind of like more of, within the hardcore thrash umbrella, and interspersed in between that chord interplay is like a palm muted minor third interval. You're going to hear that interval all the time in Cannibal Corpse. They're either going to be doing that minor third interval stuff you'll hear in the whole tone scale, and very little like kind of chromatic interplay. And that chromatic interplay is what comprises some of the best death metal, because you wind up kind of getting lost in the song when you hear like music without a tonal setter, when you have chromatic music. And there are some bands that maybe didn't do that deliberately, but when you want to turn musical convention on its head and you're able to compose something that's chromatic based, you wind up giving an impression that is very alien to someone that is used to conventional stuff. And that's what death metal should be. Death metal should be turning your back on conventional music. This and a lot of their material is too melodically consonant to kind of have a death metal backing to me. That being said, I don't hate it. It's very repetitive, but it sounds kind of inspired. And it's easy to fake the inspired kind of sound just by laying down a thrash beat, because it's got energy to it. Their typical like bomb blast type of feel that they always have. It just feels like going through the motions. But when you have like riffs that kind of glean from the thrash metal genre, you'll end up bringing that level of energy up so that it makes you seem like you have more inspiration behind your riffs than you actually have. But what I did see here, and I've listened to the song a few times just to be able to have proper research on it, they had a pretty successful means of interplay between two riffs, and then when it's time to go into the third riff, they stop everything and just have one guitar just play it by itself. And the reason they do this is because they're going from like a 4/4 feel to like a 6/8 feel. And that's hard to do. I can tell you, as a songwriter, it's hard to do that convincingly with a well thought out transition. they decide to completely say, fuck it, we're not going to even try to make a transition. We're just going to stop everything, have one guitar do it by itself. And, you know, it's a cheap way to make it work, but you've heard bands like Suffocation do it before. However, you know, when you have this much intensity built up through these two riffs that they presented, to stop everything and just have everything drop out and then play this kind of riff coming afterwards that has a completely different kind of time signature, it really just feels like it's not tied together compositionally anymore. It might as well be a different song. That and this riff that they're going to play is pretty much the same exact riff as the verse riff of an old song from the Vile record called Eaten From Inside. And, you know, if you're going to be a band for a billion years like this, you're going to wind up plagiarizing yourself. I don't blame them. But it's a little disappointing. You know, if at this point you have to, if you're this band, you have to think to yourselves, like, is putting out another record necessary? Should I be doing this? Do I feel the inspiration to do so? I'm not sure if I'm getting that, aside from the fact that I understand that based on what they presented so far in the song, they want to showcase to you that they have intensity behind what they're doing still. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit so we could hear that transition again, or lack thereof, and we'll go from there. That tag that they do on the end with the harmonized guitars, it kind of sounds a little bit saccharine, and I do like the conflicting nature of that by having, you know, what is obviously trying to be within the death metal umbrella in your riffing style, while still kind of thrashy to me, but then having this kind of saccharine sound end to it. I do like that duality that is presented, but let's see if they manage to develop it. So that power chord part that you heard before, I really did want to hear that developed later on in the song. If you're going to introduce something to break up your riff like that, you should be kind of doing a little bit of a foreshadowing effect by bringing it back in a better way later. And I know based on listening to this that they do return to that theme, but it's the exact same way, and it doesn't really serve any purpose in the song. So it's disappointing to me that they're going to tease me with potential development and then not bring it around. So they use that transition I just mentioned to kind of go back to the second riff of the song, but it feels very piecemeal to me. If you're going to utilize a transition like that, to me that transition feels like it really drops the intensity, and it's more serviceable as something that should maybe have a modulation to it where you can build up the intensity to go back to like a thrash beat like this has, but by having it just be like a empty feeling tom fill and then going right back into that second riff, it's just kind of barren to me, and I don't really feel that it has utility to it. If you're going to put in a transition in your song, it has to have utility. And both times that they've done that transition with that power chord thing, it really, I just don't understand the need for it. I think they could have essentially stitched these two riffs together without it, and it would have flown decently well enough, at least as well as it currently does. But yeah, I just don't really see the need for that. that transition just doesn't work. Like I just it feels like they stitched two different songs together to make that happen. But I don't know. Maybe they'll find a way to give a climax to this song, because essentially we've heard three riffs that have some, like the first two riffs have decent enough interplay where the intensity is built upon, and it keeps hammering that hook in where it has enough of a memorable quality to be to give you the basic guidelines for what could be a timeless song. You really do need some kind of like cemented melody for a timeless type of song, but it really just is like the arrangement to me. I really don't feel that there's a natural build, a natural ebb and flow. The dynamics of the song feel random to me. So let's see how it ends. So they did like a modulation there where they brought in some very detuned sounding guitar parts to kind of modify that original theme that opens the song. I would have liked to see that explored a little bit more. I think that this band works best when it has its slower detuned sections and some of its more mid-paced grooves. So by piquing my interest with notes in that tonal range, it really makes me want to hear some more of that explored. But then they continue with their normal themes that have already been kind of exhausted at this point in the song. So they give us that low range of the guitar at the very end, don't develop it, don't really go anywhere with it, and just end it abruptly. And as you can hear at this point in the song, as it ends, that hook is very exhausted. I did like it at first. I have a definite soft spot for well done thrash metal type of riffs. That's a mosh pit riff if you've ever heard one. But man, does it get boring to hear over and over. That being said, as I've gone through my workday after hearing this song before, it has stuck in my head. I find myself humming the melody, which is something I can't say for the last, 15 years of this band's existence. So there is something there. But once again, we're going to talk about whether or not I like it or whether or not it's objectively strong. I think I pinpointed enough things about this song to showcase that objectively the arrangement is very poor. And if you've been a band this long, and this is the longest gap they've had between records, obviously the pandemic took out a lot of people's ability to get things done. But man, I would think that they would have workshopped a lot of these kinks out. I mean, you could just feel when something feels unnatural, when you feel that when two parts are just butted up right next to each other and there's no flow, there's no tonal consistency, and it's just a completely different night and day jarring effect. That should set up a red flag for you. And if your goal is to do that in your song, obviously you want to manipulate dynamics here and there to have a desired effect on your audience, but this song has very few transitions and very few riffs. And aside from the very first two riffs, none of them are really successful. And you know, that's disappointing. But once again, this isn't a band that's ever wowed with their arrangements. I think that they may have had the best arrangement ability around their early period, like through the Bleeding and Vile. Once again, I understand why a seasoned death metal fan is going to write this band off. There is substance to their material if you look for it, at least within the melodic aspect of their guitar riffs themselves. I'm not going to say they have great songwriting. In some of my favorite songs of theirs, I still feel like there's a lot of parts that are just ham-fisted together, and a lot of the arrangements just don't work. But you know, a lot of the editing in the movies I love is fucking terrible. Most of the movies I love are cobbled together, but there's heart behind it, and this is a band that is cobbled together, but there's heart behind it. So much like the horror movies they're inspired by, they have essentially the same kind of skeleton behind it, where they have they have an idea that they want to explore. They kind of just put pen to paper and just throw it out there, and it's obviously a passion project, like an independent horror movie is, and it's not one that's done from a seasoned director. It's not one that's done by a seasoned songwriter, but it's done by someone that at least cares about their product. And you can tell that's there. Whereas, you know, I really don't know if, like, when I listen to the most recent Immolation record, Atonement, I don't know if I feel like they care about that record. And plenty of bands with this long of a tenure, like, I don't know if they care about what they're doing. I don't know if Incantation cares about what they're doing. This feels a little bit more virile than some of those type of bands' recent releases. Is it necessary? No. Does it need to exist? Not at all. This is a band that probably should have folded a long time ago. That being said, I am looking forward to hearing what Eric Rutan has composed for the record. I don't think he's an amazing songwriter himself. Obviously, he, in Hate Eternal, hasn't written a memorable record, let alone memorable songs. And in order to have something memorable, you have to have a good command of melody. You have to have an arrangement where the riffs matter in tandem with each other. And that in tandem with each other aspect is not something Cannibal Corpse has ever been good at. But you know, they were at their best at it, you know, during like the Bleeding Vile era. But it has never been a focus. So maybe Eric Rutan will be a good fit for them after all, since he's a riff guy, he's not an arrangement guy. But I'll reserve judgment until I hear the whole record. That being said, I don't think this is a band that you should completely write off if you're a death metal fan, if you're an underground death metal fan. Granted, there's a lot more substantial bands you could focus on, but I don't know that they deserve the sheer amount of hate that they get. There's plenty worse out there. That being said, there's plenty of better things out there that should demand your focus as well. So that's about all I have to say about this particular song and band, and I will catch you next time.